Welcome everybody to our session on the angels of God. This is being recorded for christadelphianvideos.org, and my name is Ron Cowie from South Australia. Welcome back to our study on the angels. We're doing the theme, the angels of God, those that stand by. In our last three studies, we've been looking at the matter of the angels and how they work in the lives of individual saints, and how they work in the lives of people that God calls to his truth, and how they protect them and guide them through life. And we've noted along the way that there is a need for us to correctly perceive angelic providence. It's not only protection, not only guidance in positive things, but there are also times when the angels put us through difficult experiences like Joseph and Jacob went through, where we have to learn from those things. And we've seen numerous examples of people who were not always delivered, but who nevertheless remained faithful to their God amidst those trials. And those trials were designed for their benefit and their growth. Now, in this series of studies on the angels, we're looking at particularly now the third issue here, which is to appreciate how God sends them to work amongst the nations in their lives. And I think we've covered that fairly well in our earlier studies on angelic providence. But I do want to bring in some notes of caution about providence, because this is a subject which can be easily misunderstood. We've noticed that the angels are those that stand by. And again, here are the references we've looked at before about how we see that when the angels are there, we see them standing by, stood by, or standing in front of people, always there with a view to help and assist and to inform. And that's the work of the angels. They are like servants that stand by, waiting commands or doing the task they've been assigned to do. And that's your key to finding them in the Bible, those that stand by or stood by. Now, there are many different ideas about providence and angels. We noted right at the outset of our studies that some of the church concepts in church art are about, angels with lovely long golden hair and big wings, looking after little children. And while it's not wrong that angels are concerned with our natural welfare, we need to make sure that we get our information from the Bible and not from church art. So looking at providence as it worked in the lives of past faithful saints, we can see how it can also work for us, with the exception perhaps that we will not see the angels face to face like some of them did. We live in an age of faith where the angels can be in our lives. We may even meet them, but they will not be known to us as angels at this stage of our pilgrimage, because this is the walk of faith that we have to live through. If we met an angel, then we would not have any need for faith. So God uses providence for his purpose in developing and perfecting his chosen people, called the saints of the Most High. So sometimes things will happen in life which are not always positive and good things that we would enjoy, but they are part of the experience of life that is for our training and education. And so God works on us as a loving father works on his children. Providence involves the use of evil as well as good. Not only good things will happen. And that's some of the caution we need to take in regard to providence. I'm going to give you a number of quotations around that matter. Take, for example, the patience of Job. He was a man that lost all of his possessions, all of his children. He lost the support of his wife. He lost his health. And, Job had a tremendous spirit of endurance through that. He said, I look for God on this hand, on the right hand, I can't find him. I look on the left and he's not there. He couldn't see where God was in his life. But he hung on to his confidence. He knoweth the way that I take. When he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. And it was that idea that he was being refined, which is taken up so often in the New Testament, that the trying of our faith works that which is the perfecting of our character eternally. His wife said to him, why don't you just curse God and die? God's taken everything away from us. Why do you still serve God? And he said, look, what shall we receive good only at the hand of God? And shall we not receive evil? And Job was very, very correct in his explanation to his wife of that matter. Part of God's plan and purpose is that evil is also used as part of the process of growth in our character. So we must correctly perceive providence. Now, in the world, that is, in the general operations of humanity, there is a thing called chance, or what just happens to happen. Coincidence, we might call it, and that can be distinct from what God does. There are laws in the physical creation that God has set into operation, the law of gravity. You jump off a building, you will go down. And that's just one of the laws of creation. So there are things that happen. If two cars come to the same corner at speed, there will be a collision. So that's the matter of chance. Now, God can control chance. God can change chance if he chooses to do so, but he doesn't always do so. And one of the reasons for that is that God has given us free will to make our choices. Sometimes we'll make bad choices. When we do, we suffer the consequences of our choices. But God allows that to happen because he knows that we might come out of this experience a better person, a person more thoughtful, a person more careful, a person more conscious of God's requirements. He lets us make mistakes sometimes. He doesn't always take away the chance in our life. He lets it happen because we can learn from it. So all divine operations have good as the ultimate end. Everything God does, whether it's not interfering with chance or whether it is interfering with chance, it's always designed for the ultimate good of God's people. And particularly as far as a certain class of mortals called the saints are concerned, that is, the ones that God is very interested in, he's very conscious of working in their lives through the angels. Ecclesiastes chapter 9 is in a book which reflects a lot about how chance operates in the world. Time and chance happens to everybody under the sun. It's a fact of life that God's laws bring time and chance into operation. And so Solomon says, but all this I laid to heart, examining it all, how the righteous and the wise and their deeds are in the hand of God. And he makes the point that while the whole world is subject to chance, there are some that are in the hand of God. There are some that God does care for, that he does sometimes interfere in their lives to make things happen in a certain way because they're in his hand. So while there is chance generally in the world, God can alter that, particularly for the concern of his people, the saints. Now, I'm going to read a lot of quotations from the writings of Brother Roberts and a few other writers because our brethren have pondered about this matter in the past and come up with some very great summaries of what providence really is. And this is the hand of the angels working in our lives. The only providence that exists in the universe is the control of natural circumstances by angelic agency in the unseen manner. Outside of this control, all is chance. For there is such a thing as chance. But chance is controlled when the purpose of God requires it. This control is exercised in accordance with the charge which the angels receive from the Creator. And their charge is to get us into the kingdom of God, to work on our lives and our character to make us fit for the kingdom. And that's from the Ways of Providence, page 233. Again, Brother Roberts. All divine operations have good as the ultimate end as far as a certain class, the saints, are concerned. There is such a thing as chance operating in the world as distinct from what God does. So again, very clear statements on what providence is. Repeatedly we are told that God acted in affairs of men, but often we are shown that the required situation was brought about by a chain of circumstances which seem to be completely mundane. So what he's saying here is that much of the providence in our lives will be unrecognizable until we reflect on it later on. One of the best illustrations is this in the words of Samuel. Tomorrow, about this time, so we have a day and a time, I will send a man out of the land of Benjamin. So Samuel is told that on the next day at a certain time, a man from a neighboring tribe will arrive. And we find out that this has been in progress for some time. There were some asses that went and got lost, and the man has been looking for these lost asses, and he's come right down to the land of Benjamin, from the land of Benjamin right down to where Samuel was. And he came and he arrived at exactly the time that God had said. So God had arranged a situation to bring Saul, King Saul as it came to be, to the presence of the prophet Samuel. So again, providence was working. Saul would never have imagined that it was the lost asses that brought him to Samuel. But Samuel, of course, had been told that God had been working on this. An apparently mundane situation was brought to pass by the providence of God. Again, Brother Roberts, all natural things are not divine. Few of them are. If we cannot make out which are and which are not, we need not be concerned. Sufficient that God may be at work where things are apparently natural. It is ours to conform in all modesty to what God has required, without reference to the undeterminable question of where and when he works in the present walk of faith. So it's not wise for us to go through life claiming providence for every little incident, putting God to the test by saying, if this happens, then I'll know it's providence, or if my house sells for this price, I know that God wants me to move. None of those things are things that God is particularly concerned with. And certainly not our material prosperity is a thing that God is concerned with. So, we don't spend a lot of time trying to work out what providence is. Providence is best appreciated when we look back on our life and we can see how that what seemed to be very irregular things, uncertain things, dangers, and sometimes even decisions we made were actually directed by God for his purposes. And we'll talk a bit about that perhaps at another time. This is Brother Islip Collier, who succeeded Brother Roberts in the editor of Christadelphian. We cannot be sure that any particular circumstance of modern times has been in a similar manner controlled. But often in retrospective review, we see things which look so much like the scriptural pattern that although we may not venture to affirm that the hand of God was in them, we would not dare deny. So what he's really saying there is, when you look back at your life and things that happen in other people's lives in review, you can see that providence very likely was at work. You can't claim it, you can't demand it, you can't make it a personal testimony like some people do, that some coincidence happens in your life. It may have been a God, it may not have been. One thing I have found in life is that when you look back at your life and you were trying to do something that God had required you to do, like preach the gospel, and particularly in mission areas, the amount of incidents of apparent providence are quite remarkable. And there are many, many individual stories that you can tell about cases where angels may have been very active and even appeared to people at certain times in the mission fields, but they didn't realize it at the time. So you can look back and you can say that may well have been providence. Brother Collier, who had worked alongside Brother Robert Roberts for so many years and traced the journey of his life, and particularly wrote a beautiful book about Robert Roberts' life, he said this: to the present writer, much of the experience of Robert Roberts is suggestive of such a thought. And you can only see some of the tribulations Brother Roberts went through, the places he had to move to, some of the things that happened around his preaching efforts, to see how that it's very obvious to see that God was at work in the life of Robert Roberts. But, we don't claim providence as a preaching tool like some people do. Back with the ways of providence by Brother Roberts. But one may say, how do I know that God is with me? Well, such may find their answer in these words: the Lord is with you while you be with him. If you seek him, he will be found of you. If you forsake him, he will forsake you. And he's here quoting from the First of Chronicles 15, verse 2. The scriptures abound with similar declarations. In other words, rather than worry, is God with us? Let's make sure we are with God, because if we are, he will be with us. How to work with the angels. Well, this again is Robert Roberts, and this is a very sobering passage. The scriptures make the course of every earnest man clear. Seek the Lord in the reading of his word, in prayer to him and in doing the things he has commanded. He will guide your ways in the darkness without any apparent interference, and cause all things, yea, even evil circumstances, to work together for your good, namely your preparedness for an entrance into the glorious kingdom. But if you decline from his ways and seek your own pleasure, he will leave you to your own, perhaps successful devices, which will at last work out your own self-destruction. So it's clear, isn't it? To work with the angels, we do the things that God requires of us. We read his word, we pray to him, and we put our lives in his hands. Remember the friends of Daniel. They were absolutely confident that God was able to deliver them from the burning firing furnace, but they would not presume that God would do it. It may be that this was their time to die. Whatever, they did what God commanded, and that was never to worship idols. And so they said, but if not, O king, we will not serve your gods or worship your golden image which you have set up. So they were hopeful that God would preserve them. They believed he would deliver them, but they always gave the possibility that if it didn't happen, then it didn't change their attitude to keeping the commandments. A very useful little balanced statement there. We have a very personal relationship with the angels, and I believe that many angels have been very close to individual saints down through time. And we suggested last time that it is one of the privileges of being an angel to actually work in the life of at least one saint. And this particular angel here is Gabriel, and he's very attached to John. When John tries to worship the angel of Revelation, he says, don't do that, see thou do it not. For I am thy fellow servant, and of thy brethren the prophets, and of them that keep the sayings of this book worship God. And there is the guarantee that angels can work in our lives, that we try and keep the sayings of this book. And that's a very personal relationship with the angels. The day is going to come when the angels will rejoice at our salvation. These are the words of Revelation 5, verse 9 to 11, talking about the day when the kingdom is opened and the saints are there and they sing the song of the redeemed. They sang a new song. This is a new song because no one's ever been able to sing this before. They sing to Christ, "Thou art worthy to take the book and to open the seals thereof. For thou wast slain and hast redeemed us to God by thy blood out of every kindred and tongue and people and nation, and hast made unto our God kings and priests, and we shall reign on the earth." And that is the portion of the kingdom song that the saints will sing in their tremendous appreciation of the work of Christ that has given them a place in the kingdom. But then there's a chorus, and the chorus comes from the angels. "I beheld and I heard the voice of many angels around about the throne, also giving praise to God, because their work with the saints has now come to fruition." It's a lovely thought, this connection between the angels and the saints, all of them part of the family of God, and the way they can work together. Let's remember, though, that our life will not always be good without any change to that sometimes when evil is brought into our lives. Evil is part of the process of development, and we need to be ready to work with God even though the times might be difficult. A beautiful little summary about the work of the angels. Perhaps it will only be from the sanctuary of the kingdom that we will fully appreciate the remarkable hand of providence that worked in our apparently unremarkable lives. When we realise how often we were spared, how often we were led away from temptation, and how much the angel accomplished despite us, there will be a tremendous sense of gratitude to the Father of spirits. Let us not despise the day of small things, confident that all things do work together for our good. So that concludes our session on providence. We're now going to move on in our next study to deal with the topic of being made equal unto the angels. Thank you for your attendance at this session.